Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good morning. We have a very interesting day because we are having a number of activities that are going in parallel, but hopefully we'll have a very interesting discussion around technologies in healthcare. And I think it's a very timely discussion amidst the difficult times. We need to take care of our health as well as the health of our relatives. Therefore, it would be very interesting to listen to some of the answers of our guests with regards to the development of medical technologies. What is the Ukraine's perspective with regards to medical technologies? And I'd like to say that we have Dmytro Shimkin with us, the board director of the Diagnostics group. We have Miroslav Saban, he's the head of government public affairs Philips at Central and Eastern Europe. We'll have Alexander Kolyada with us later on. He will join us. I will introduce him later on. And we have Maxim Kitko, the founder of the IMAC company, has breakthrough technologies offering treatment to people with cardiovascular diseases. So let's start with Mitchell. What are our current trends in healthcare? Anything we should expect? So thank you for the invitation and to this EBA event. As far as I know, we have a marathon that is being in process right now. So I have several slides for you, and we'll be able to discuss modern technologies. And we'll start with just a few information about myself. We have a large increase in biodata, that is biomarkers, that is the data that have been acquired by different equipment, and the amount of data is being increased. This is the trend. So the devices around us, they collect enormous amount of information about our health state, about our parameters of our body. And this is something that you can monitor in the dynamic mode. Speaking about the accumulated data, that's another trend. We're talking about the artificial intelligence that together with the biodata, it allows to process the accumulated knowledge and make several insights by gathering the data, by processing the data that we acquire. And speaking of the cardiology or about sportsmen, we're talking about the cardiologic data and markers that are used in cardiology. They could be used together with the biomarkers related to the muscle state, blood pressure, etc. And all of that allows to prognosticate and to understand the possibility of any illness or the health condition. Let's go forward. The next trend that I want to discuss, and this trend became global because of pandemics. We're talking about the telemedicine. Over 40 companies in the United States, they're actively developing and using the telemedicine, and it has increased by 35% in the market over a year, and it continues to grow. And telemedicine is something that is being using the elements of artificial intelligence and allows to do the diagnostics automatically. And therefore, we receive some digital humans. These are virtual assistants allowing to process any applications of the patient to the doctor and to do some preliminary diagnostics automatically. This is not anything absolutely fantastic. This is something that is currently done by Amazon, by Google. This is already a trend. What about Ukraine? No, not for Ukraine yet, but anyone can experiment with digital human. You can just register and create your own avatar. An American insurance company allowed to simulate the patient treatment, the application of the patient, and to provide the largest amount of services without increasing the number of personnel for the this insurance company. The next, so this is just an overall of the current trends. There's so many information. The next trend is the use of robotics. We've definitely heard of Da Vinci, which is currently used for very complicated surgical operations, but the latest achievement in the use of chips or the capsules that you can see right now, inside that capsule is the robot. And when it is consumed by our body, it can be remotely controlled. It reaches the most distant parts of our body, and it's being used for either doing some manipulation or for bringing the drugs that we need or the medicines that we need. It's being used for also the treatment of different stomach diseases, and it can be turned into a different service which can be used for blocking certain illnesses, or it can be used to neutralize any bleedings, any other treatments. The other application of this robotics is the use of contact lenses that are capable of identifying the level of blood sugar in the body. This is something that is not existent in Ukraine. Currently, many companies in Ukraine are investing in digital technologies. If you take a look at the volume of data currently gathered in Ukraine when you are visiting doctors, I mean, the medical information system, these information allows to analyze the behavior of doctors, diagnostics, the dynamics of different diagnoses, the regional sort of landscape of diagnosis, and you can come up with the trends of certain sicknesses, the behavior of certain doctors when the documents are being filled by the assistants and not the doctors. This is an example of using the big data. There are many companies in Ukraine currently working on the processing of information, of creating solutions. I will have a separate sort of words on digiceuticals, which is a special thing for diabetics and for solving primarily some primary issues for diabetics. But the diabetics is using at least 7 apps on his cell phone because he needs to calculate something, he needs to do some monitoring. There was not a single app that was created to cover all of them. There is, if we're talking about the contact lenses, there is a question of preliminary diagnostics of diabetes based on the assessment of different of our fluids and solutions. It allows to identify the diabetes earlier than it can be seen from a variety of other markers. This is a well-known technology, and there is a Ukrainian company which is currently developing a lot of equipment for this diagnostics. There is personalized drugs. This is something that we've been experimenting already among the Ukrainian pharmaceutical companies. And every human is unique. And we all know that by creating individual drugs is something very complicated because there is an issue of efficiency. We all need certain dosage of drugs, and this is a well-known issue in the medicine, but after a certain period of time, we'll understand that the dosage has to be individual. It has to depend on the health state of this or that patient, on the treatment process, on the dynamics of the treatment. One of the areas currently developing, which is a 3D printing of medicines. It allows to do the layered printing There are examples when you can print the pill in 3 or 4 layers, and you can produce combined or mixed medicines. And this is something that you're doing in Darwin. This is something that we are currently analyzing and learning. And the major issue about all these trends is about the efficiency, whether it's going to be efficient, effective, and it's an example of a personalized service. And Amazon is very interesting in that respect. It's a technological company, and it started the healthcare sector development by procuring a company. So you can do some personalized orders and receive a personalized healthcare pack. But so far, it's only in the United States. The other important trend is the microbial biome. It's being learned currently in Ukraine. And what is it? It's all the microorganisms that we have within the human stomach. We have over 700 species. So we are currently doing the DNA analysis of the microbiome, because whenever you will understand how the microbiome looks like, and we're currently doing the analysis of that, later on, we have cases when there are patients which generate their own microbiome, and they have not only their own DNA as the person, as the individual, but they have microbiome of all the rest of the microorganisms. So having an understanding of the DNA of your microbiome, you will be able to sort of prognosticate the further treatment. So digitaceuticals, this is a large trend. It's going to be a large trend for Ukraine. We know that pharmaceuticals are currently engaged in that. Digiceuticals, as I've said, is a large trend. Whenever we are prescribing certain apps, and it could be related to brain health, it could be related to neural disorders, and there are digiceuticals certified by the FDA already, which are being used for the treatment of sleep, for different neural disorders, and they are covered by the insurance companies. So it's a large trend, and Ukraine has a lot of developers, and whenever there will be digiceuticals, it can be happening that medical doctors will be prescribing digiceuticals. Look, no, look. Let me explain. Let me explain. Right, anyone who is visiting a doctor, right, and the doctor may prescribe either different pills or medicines or different physical procedures, or they can prescribe you the use of certain mobile app, like 3 times per day, like 10 minutes every time. And it has a feedback tool which allows the doctor to monitor the condition. And so the insurance company would pay for that. And there are many jokes around it, but one of the areas is PSTD. And there are mobile apps which are already certified by the FDA, and they're currently being used for the treatment of these sort of conditions. And there are mobile apps that allows to overcome the anxiety. 3D printing, just a second. I mean, in these mobile apps, there are certain advices. What's in there? Let's get a few examples. There are mobile apps that are capable to monitor the way you sleep, and they're allowed to make certain adjustments whenever you start your sleep, whenever you wake up. There are applications that allow what to have a certain game, and the game is designed in a way that it has an impact on your brain activity, as well as the level of your anxiety. We listen to music, and that has an impact. At the same time, we can use the game, the mobile game, and it can have an impact on the level of anxiety of a person, of an individual. And all the international companies, they have a special department which is currently investing in digiceuticals, and the major trend is the brain health, neurology and brain health. There's huge investments in that aspect. In Darnica, we're currently learning that. We're currently considering possible investments in startups, in those companies developing digiceuticals. We're currently in the process of negotiations with several companies developing digiceuticals, and they could be used in portfolio with other medicines that we are producing. So after a certain period of time, we believe that we will be able to offer not only the medicines, the infusions, but the mobile apps of a treatment nature. Now, another several slides, that's 3D printing, another important trend. You know, there are certain 3D printing for tooth prosthetics. There is a Ukrainian startup, but spends most of his time in the United States, and they're doing the 3D printing of bones after the different traumas and things like that, depending on the needs of this or that person. And this is a large trade. Besides, 3D printing is actively used by surgeons whenever they're doing the simulation of complicated surgical operations. The 3D printing could be done in several layers, several color, using several types of materials. And by printing certain part of the human body, you can do the surgical operation on a model. And it's all about the issue of developers participating in the 3D scanning and developing the printers with high resolution and high precision. This is something that is a big trend, and top universities are currently developing this area. Then new healthcare players, that's a new trend. Currently, we have Microsoft, Amazon, Google. They are large healthcare players. They are investing significant amount of money in healthcare. The most recent investment, the Microsoft has M12 healthcare investment fund, and they've invested into drug discovery, which is all about searching or innovating different drugs and medicines using in silico modeling whenever the protein is being simulated on a chip and its behavior is being processed using the quantum DCs, and they're used for searching solutions for different tasks. And that allowed to reduce the time that the medicine is being located in the body in 10 times. The Amazon is investing into healthcare. They're investing, well, it's working in healthcare sector. They have health delivery system, and the US residents, they can buy medicines from Amazon, and Amazon continues to invest in that area. The Google has sent all the team working in the medical developments that will send it to Harvard Medical School. And whenever we search in Google headache, it appears there are different types of headache. And in order to understand how to structure the advices, the commands, the search engine, these large players, they're trying to get deeper into that area. It's just an overview because all of these trends are very important global. And the last aspect is gene editing. We have a lot of representatives who are actively working in the field of DNA. So that's a bridge to them. It's all about biohacking and gene editing. It's a large topic today because whenever you know your own DNA, my children have DNA, like, and they have a chance, and future doctors can simulate their DNA, can learn the behavior and learn the influence of different genes on the behavior of the person, on their body. And so their DNA could be used for scientific researches, and it allows to participate in researching the behavior of different medicines. There is an active trend currently. Whenever there is the data gathered over the DNA, they're participating in identifying the medicine's behavior. There are very different and interesting results because those medicines that have undergone this analysis, it appears that there is a different effectiveness of different medicines with regards to different patients. So it allows the doctors to adjust different medicine depending on certain circumstances. I mean, I know my condition better and I can adjust it, but the world moves forward and we can adjust the genes and we can change the human. Okay, so you're not going to be Dmitro Shimkiv, you're going to be someone else. Well, there are a lot of experiments, like a robots. Like no. It's all about optimizing our body, like gene modified individuals. That's cool. It's interesting. That's one of the great trends that we have, considering the R&Ds in progress with regards to DNA, because analyzing DNA in the past would take you a couple of weeks. Now the technologies allow you to do that within an hour. Well, you have your DNA analysis test results. Are you planning to change your genes, or that's personal data? Well, primarily, of course, it's a personal data. Would you like to change something? Well, I looked at it and I'd say I'm okay. There are genes that provide me with certain advantages, maybe even disadvantages, but there is a balance right now. There is a group of people that are combined by the idea of gene editing, by offering additional functionality for themselves. There are people who are trying to add on different functionality coming from animals. Like there are people who can feel the direction to the north. Like yeah, this tool is taken from the birds. So later on, they will be able to fly. No, not fly, but definitely they would be able to understand where the north is. Well, there are people who can feel the earthquake. So it's not movies, it's not feature films, but there are people who have certain limitations or have certain disease because of, I mean, they have troubles understanding the colors. So they've managed to get a camera inside his main brain, and it allows them to identify the color and the temperature. So for him, it's like a thermal vision device. He can see more than we do. Now that's interesting. When it's illness, it's one thing, but whenever the people are well doing that intentionally and using the gene of a bear for themselves to have an understanding of the north, that's another thing. That's cool. That's cool. But we'll see what would be the result of such activity. Miroslava, let's switch to you.
giant pharmaceutical firm, and you are representing Dutch and actually international company. What can you add in terms of the trends which are now available on the market in the healthcare technologies, and how do you see the developments of the introduction of those trends here in Ukraine? Do you see that Ukraine is far away from the world development, or somewhere in the middle?
Thank you, Anna, for the questions. Good morning, everybody. I'm really pleased to be here, and thanks for the excellent overview presentations of my previous colleagues and the speaker. I think this is one point I would like to highlight to connect to the previous presentations. We talk about the new things, newcomers in the healthcare domain. We talk about new inventions. And actually, I will talk from the perspective of the company, which is 130 years in the market. And I think this is something that everybody will ask ourselves, how to sustain 130 years in the market and in the healthcare business. So you really have to reinvent yourself. You really have to think very thoroughly, how the progress goes and where the progress goes and how you can adapt yourself. From the Philips perspective, as a global company, we are operating in 100 countries. And I will come back to the trends if you allow me. Yeah. And I think these 100 countries operations give us a lot of opportunity to learn. And our mission is really to improve the lives of 2.5 billion people by 2030. This is a very good ambition, but we can do it with innovations that we have to transform ourselves. And where this transformation comes from, we are still in COVID, and we are just after the 2020 year of COVID. It teaches us a lot how the healthcare is important. And the Philips as a company is strongly embarking in the following directions that I would like to say. If you look at the healthcare, we see some main 4 trends that are actually happening right now in everybody of us being in the healthcare system. Healthcare has to really transform from the volume business to the value business. This is what you are mentioning right before. Personalized medicine, we have to move in this case. Secondly, we don't want to be episodic cases in the healthcare system. We need to continuous healthcare. So we have to strategize the way we go with the healthcare and how the healthcare system operates. And then on the other side, we don't want to basically treat, we would like to prevent. We would like to healthy living. This is a lot about you've been mentioning as well. How we track our health conditions, how we take care that we are really living very healthy, feeding healthy, having the good proper of hygiene, taking the oral care and so on. And most important thing that I think Ukraine is really progressing quite strongly is access to the healthcare. We are sitting in Kiev right now, and we have the hospitals around. How about the people in the rural area? How to reach the healthcare to those people? Look, the COVID, they're not treated. They're hardly getting some in global domain. They're getting hardly some care. So this is a challenge for the future that we are thinking very thoroughly with our partners how to change this. Now coming back to Ukraine, Ukraine is making excellent steps. If I can compare, it's not my first time in Kiev, and I'm really very pleased to be again here. You have an excellent footprint in digital technologies, and I think this is also what you've been showing as well, which is a fantastic platform for the scaling up and access to the healthcare, and also the bringing the other technologies into connections, connecting people, data, and the technology. Where do we see really as a potential of the next step is really collaborating with the key stakeholders of the Ukraine healthcare system, how to share this knowledge, how to share the global knowledge available in supporting the developments of the healthcare system. We have situations that certain oblasts are developing their way, but we have also good examples that the country and the government has been developing strong programs, cardiology programs, oncological programs. These are definitely the needs, because what we see right now from our general experience, and we've been touching this before the meeting, we see a lot of patients coming in oncological cases with the very late stages. Why? Because they've been afraid to go during the COVID time to the hospitals. We see also a lot of cardiac cases emerging after the hospital, after the COVID, passing the patients in elderly age. How to deal with these patients, how to move the care settings from the hospital side to the low-cost settings, to the homes, how to reach the patients at homes. So this is our challenge that we are looking very much. On one side, we are preventing, we are looking for the healthy living, but the other side, we would like to look for the patients, how to reach them at home. All of us being as a potential patients today. So I think these are the challenges. Ukraine is going very well. We would like to be really sharing more of these kind of experiences like Invent today. And I think there is a time to come. So that's maybe a short summary.
But as far as I understand, some analytical experts, they are saying, for example, from Frost and Sullivan, they actually forecast that by 2025, we will all have tele-assistants, telemedical assistants. And in overview, Dmitry, we just also have heard that telemedicine is one of the trends which develops. Do you really believe that the speed of introduction of this telemedicine would allow us to have also in Ukraine all those telemedicine assistants in place. And that would probably help to serve rural area as well, right?
Yeah, I deeply believe. Now, the question is the timing.
Exactly.
So it depends, different countries come from the different platform. Infrastructure is basically a strong enabler of the telemedicine. So we really have to think how to partner with the companies who are providing the infrastructural part to the rural areas. But what I would like to maybe highlight three constraints that we see right now that is shaping dynamics of the transformation. One thing is definitely there is a lack of resources. The hospitals are absolutely tremendously occupied and under the pressure or operations. Secondly, there is a lack of the healthcare professionals compared to the number of the patients. So
now you're talking about Ukraine or all over the world.
Ukraine, but as well impacting as well global as well. Mm-hmm. I think this is also driving the speed of the transformation. You know, how much you would like to offset the points of pain to the low-cost areas, you know, how you would like to move from the hospital setting to the hospital setting. And I think we have some good examples in the neighborhood. We've been piloting the programs as well in Estonia, which is one of the most digital countries in EU. We are doing a stroke pathway program with the Estonian government, assessing how to let the patients go through the stroke care program, but as well evaluating the feedback of the stroke care program and also monitoring them potentially in the future at home, because there's a long-term process as well, healing and recovering at home. So coming back to the Ukraine, I think there is a good progress, there is a good possibilities. The point here that I would like to highlight, it's just a matter of teaming up and showing the good examples. We all like to believe, you know, what you see, what you see, that you trust. And I think really sharing experience like this one, sorry that I'm not sharing presentations, I think that will be quite some things to share with you. But I think I'm inviting actually the key stakeholders, and this is what we do in our role, in most of the countries, the government, the oblast representatives and all the others, come and visit, come and join us, come to show you actually how we operate and what we think with our innovation centers, how we operate with artificial intelligence solutions as well, how we do remote telemonitoring and telecare at home. That has been nicely presented before. So I'm very positive on this.
And where they should go actually? To Holland or where?
I would invite everybody really to go to Holland, because this is our headquarters in Holland, but we have so many cases and examples of the customers adapting and also preparing and working in the partnership with us. And let me give you one example of the partnership, and this is why I'm strongly calling as a message. Out of 17.3 billion euro of turnover of Philips or sales in 2020, 30% comes in the partnership. So what does partnership means? We go hand in hand together, developing some solutions, planning, designing, implementing, taking care, maintaining, and then following up, being the big equipment, big iron, if you can say it, big modalities, or talking about the telecare. So this is what the call and invitations for the key stakeholders to really partner. And I think this is a critical risk sharing.
But do you think in this case, do you feel that there would be some space for cooperation between Darnica, for example, or IMEC and Philips, or it's not the case?
It's just to evaluate actually where the points of the cohesion can come. I think that's also not to state something because I'm too superficial at this very moment, don't have enough information. But what Philips is looking very carefully, I think we are looking for the startup companies in any market, any country. We have the program which is called within the Philips HealthWorks, and we are carefully assessing any startup company. And any startup company can access the Philips HealthWorks platform and apply, provide the solutions, provide what they do, and we are carefully evaluating. And there is a number of the companies that we are supporting financially to grow up the solutions that we believe they are trend setting, and they're also complying with our pathway. So that's possible. So I think it's all in the dialogue.
And what kind of new things have you developed during those 2 years of pandemics? Have you brought something new to the market?
Yes, I think there is many new things. If you talk about, let's say, there's a kind of general constraints and the cost. It's all over cost. And basically one of the things that we wanted to be very sure, you know, how to reduce the cost and how to deal with the materials which are very rare on the earth. Let's imagine the magnetic resonance. You know, everybody is familiar with magnetic resonance. One of the crucial part of the magnetic resonance is a helium. It's a 1.3 thousand liters of helium, which is just few places in the world that have the helium. When the helium is gone, that will be very critical. So instead of 1.3 thousand liters of helium in magnet, we produce the new MRI of 7 liters of helium. So you can imagine you're just reducing 1.3 tons from the MRI. This helium cannot evaporate. It's all time in. It's just completely changing the technology shape. If you talk about we talk about the cardiac program, and you talk about the cardiovascular disease treatment, we've been designing the Azurian platform of the cardiovascular systems, improving the experience of the patients and the experience of the doctors, speeding up the process, but automating system very much, collaborating with Microsoft, making some solutions which are really very intuitive, like on the Microsoft devices, and actually helping the doctors to speed and treat fast, and also patients with the minimal invasive therapy to be recovered fast. So less time spent in the hospital, less cost actually for the patients, and less trauma for the patients. So these are a couple of examples. Oh, let's say Ukraine is now buying a device which is called IVUS, intravascular ultrasounds, in Lviv. And I think this is with our distributor partner, IFS. It's actually installed in a cardiac setup where the people can be diagnosed with intravascular ultrasound, really precisely assessing the risk factor of the potential cardiovascular diseases. I think these are the trends and the new technologies. And I will be also very honest, we invented ourselves as well, but we are also acquiring the companies. And I think we are really getting and looking what is on the market and where we can merge with the companies, with the technology, to provide the best care to our patients and to our healthcare professionals.
And according to your experience, what is the country with the best healthcare system?
As a Philips
in the world.
Philips comes from the Netherlands. I will just not be very,
you will be
very
biased
objective.
then.
Yes,
if not biased, if objectively.
I will be very objective. It's really there are cases, there are studies, analysis showing really the healthcare of the Netherlands is really very advanced. I'm not saying the best, but I think this is really the model how it is set, and it's again invitation for the visit of the delegation to really maybe learn about the healthcare of the Netherlands, because they really make it entrepreneurial. They're very efficient in doing the things. But I will just mention one thing that has been very important in assessing the healthcare system, and this is a measurement of the value and the output that the patient is getting as a care. It's more than one word, but it's a measurements of the output. How do you treat your patients, and how the patient, each of us, is evaluating the care. And once we put those standards, I think we are progressing to the next level. So patient has to give the feedback on his treatment and his well-being after the treatment. But I will invite
to Netherlands.
To Netherlands.
But you know, actually, for a regular Ukrainian, it's probably almost impossible to go to Netherlands for treatment, right?
For the treatment, yes. I think let's bring the treatment of the Netherlands to Ukraine.
It would be excellent. Yeah, but what actually blocks it from coming to Ukraine? I guess financing, right?
Thank you. I think there are two things I would like to be stating here. Financing is one of the things for sure, and I think not necessary. We are very liable as a company and any manufacturers. You know, when you bring the product to the market, you are really, you take liability. The patient has to be treated very carefully because you would like to source the equipment where it is coming from. It's a little bit of questions of dealing with the gray market, importing the equipment from the sources that are not certified, not proved. And that's really something, that might pose the challenge. You have the impression you have the good equipment, but actually there is no proof point, there is no certificate that this is really state-of-the-art equipment with the latest tools and the software. This is one thing. And that's definitely financing. So I think the governmental programs in this case with the financial institutions and might change this environment. But I mean, the World Bank program in Ukraine is well developed, and there is a lot of developments as well in many oblasts in Ukraine through the cardiac setup. So I think you addressed the good one. But we might look together for the solution in this case.
Interesting, thank you.
Thank you.
You would like to add something?
No, it's just on top of it that you need to have a people capable to operate the equipment.
Yes.
It requires education. It requires the proper preparation of the professionals. So there is the more complex the equipment, the higher needs for training.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the focus of Ukrainian government needs to be also addressed to the quantity of doctors and also quantity of nurses, because a lot of operations equipment that's developed by Philips is in developed market are operated not by doctors.
By sisters. But at the same time, it seems to me the government and not only have to take care about the payment to those people, because probably most likely their salaries in Ukraine are far less than in Netherlands, most likely, no?
Difficult to compare right now, and the cost of living is also different. So I think this is
let's miss it, because as far as I understand, actually some doctors in the globe, in Europe, they can operate even operations distantly, so they can stay on some yacht on boat, but nevertheless they can navigate their instruments for the patient who is sitting in the hospital, for example, in Netherlands or in Spain or elsewhere, right? Is it possible?
It is possible, though, it's a still critical topic. Infrastructure and the safety and the liability for this kind of the procedure, this is a critical. I would say more to see it on the experimental basis than really on the routine basis, because it's a quite remote distance, and still this human touch between the doctor, healthcare provider, and the patient is important one, especially in the critical cases. And you have the multiple parameters if you're doing surgery that you have to be aware of. So I think the artificial intelligence
no online.
No,
yet.
Not yet. Yes.
At least, but maybe in 50 years or 20 years, maybe it will develop.
Trend is there.
Exactly. Thank you. Давайте рухатися далі. У нас є чудовий наступний.
Let's move forward. We have a next guest, Alexander Kolyada, with us. PhD in biology, geneticist, co-founder and scientific director of the Molecular Genetic Laboratory, gerontologist, founder of the School of Longevity, so many other things really to mention. Extraordinary person. So how do you think the future with regards to the changes in genome? What do you think about the trends that we've mentioned today? Will they be implementing to life, and how they will have an impact on the life expectancy of the human? Will we be able to live, I don't know, until 200 years or something like that? Thank you. I'd like to add to the conversation that we have about the future. Look, I really want to just get up in the world with all these technologies already in place. Whenever we're talking about new technologies, I'd like to have this word, when do they happen? What planning horizon are we talking about? I remember that fantasy films that we had in 1980s, 1985 about the future, about the past and things like that. So that was a film with the flying cars and things like that. And people said that will happen, that will be developed in something around 2000s or something like that. So we need to understand the planning horizon, because in some cases, there could be things that are as distant as you can grasp it with your own hand, but the others, I think I won't live up to them. Well, the other thing that could be an answer to your question, this time machine is somewhere here. And you have to understand this. You can go to Netherlands or you can go to Poland and your life expectancy is going to be higher. And if you will travel around these planets, you will see all the different ages of development. You can see something from the ancient time technologies and all the way to modern technologies. We'll see when those modern technologies will be developed in Ukraine. Because one thing is the Silicon Valley, when a robot would be able to arrive to you and will make a surgical operation, it's not going to mean that we'll have something in Ukraine. So you don't have an answer. When do we have this future for Ukraine? Well, I don't know about this planning horizon. When you start going deep into different details, then it's going to be difficult for you to prognosticate. Speaking of the trends, and one more thing, we're talking about the biotech, the medical technologies, and things like that. Well, there could be an input of a certain of a bubble. So, meaning there are experts that are working in laboratories. They're trying to find something. They're trying to approach to that bubble, and we are thinking that the microbiome of GI tract will answer all of your questions. I mean, there are analysis. There is not too much understanding of how this process is happening. The 3D printing technologies, they are available. The Australian company can print many parts of your body. It's going to be very expensive, but the printing is not about that. So they're printing out the frames, and then they're infusing that with the cells that are taken from their body. And there are a company that is using the tissue from the bone of a bull or any other animals. And so the basket looks pretty well. I mean, we can use the 3D printer in order to print out your bone. So 3D printing is not something that we really need in some cases. So this is a very important step in the development of this market. We need to attract a lot of investments to produce serious stimul or motivation in further investments. Just the technologies are not ready yet, because unfortunately the science, it develops not as fast as the marketology or things like that. So these are fairly controversial arguments, but still, speaking about the trends, in terms of diagnostics, it's all about personalization. This is something mentioned by Dmitry. Everything's going to be personalized. We have, well, for example, in 1950s, 1960s, we finally started to treat different sicknesses based on certain evidences. And before that, different doctors treated different medicine in their own way. Later on, they started to build the treatment based on certain evidence and things like that. And then we do the testing of the medicine, or we do field testing based on the patients, and we are making assessment whether the medicine works or not. So over this 50 or 70 years, we managed to give answers to many questions: which pill is working, which pill is not. When you look at the raw data, what has happened within a group of people who consume that drug, and you could see that for some people that medicine helped a lot. In some cases, they did worth. In some cases, they did nothing. So that difference in selecting the three groups of people, why wouldn't we be able to find those people to whom that medicine appeared to be a very good, produce positive output? So we need to find those people and identify that this is a good medicine for them. And just a similar situation for those that are having troubles because of consuming that medicine. So we need to identify all of those groups of people in order to identify where this medicine would be effective or not. It's just that the science is lacking the tools to do that. And currently we have a small number of tools. If you tell the patient to go to a laboratory and make certain tests and do that test for 10 times, and then we'll prescribe you a pill, they would not be happy for that. Of course, that's a long path, but on the overall, it will increase the effectiveness of their treatment. The other trend, it's all about the preventive medicine. And this is something that I like more if compared with the urgent medicine. I can be mistaken. How many medicines do we have for treating Alzheimer's disease? I think there was one medicine, but there was scandal after it's being approved. So this is something very important, and this is very popular disease. Unfortunately, it's when the person forgets about his past, about his identity. So over 20 years, we don't have a single medicine. This is the area of investment. This is the area of that attracts most investments in the world. Okay, according to the conditions, according to the legislation, regulation in Ukraine, we are supposed to have a certain place to to have all those people with Alzheimer, and we don't have any medicine. And this is something that is happening in one of 50 people in Ukraine. So far at this moment, we don't have any medicines to treat this Alzheimer's disease. After 40 years of development, we've have significant developments in AIDS and things like that. In COVID, it took us like a year and a half to produce at least something. We don't have anything for Alzheimer. So, for example, we have a lot of people like aged over 70. So every like out of 50 person aged up to 70 would have an Alzheimer. Hey, well, the Alzheimer disease has been known for, I don't know, 100 years. Speaking of AIDS, it's been known for, I don't know, 20, 30 years. The reason I'm telling you this is that we're using a lot of pills as part of a preventive disease. And and you can do many stuff. And it works. I'm talking about the HLS, and there is a high tech for that. Don't have too much of that because there's not too many people who would be able to invest into this research. You wouldn't be able to find any carrot producer who would be able to invest money in researches, like which carrot would help you to to treat certain disease. And why HLS is so good for Alzheimer? Well, to be very brief, no one knows. And everything good is good, everything bad is bad. That's, well, there is another word, the one who's not smoking and not drinking, then he will die, but in a healthy way. But look, one of the person who lived till the age of 120, he smoked for 90 years. We are trying to analyze those people who live for a long period of time in Ukraine. We're trying to analyze their DNA to identify any genes that have an impact on their longevity. And I talked a lot to those people, and they're not, they're not the sort of the applicants of the AHLs. Many of them are smoking, drinking. They have a lot of problems, different one, but they have good genetics. They have certain genes that allow them to live after 90s. That's a lottery for someone. Well, for someone, it's a lottery. For someone, it's the technology. And here is the third aspect, which all about the therapy. When you know the genes that would make you live long, even though you smoke and drink, you start doing the genome editing. And this is sort of prevention version 2.0. So you're trying to prescribe the medicine that will make him sort of protected against a certain medicine. This is against the law in some countries. We don't have a proper understanding how this works and how this could be regulated. But for you to understand, in Thailand, in one of the streets, I've counted 10 clinics who are doing the gene editing of different the gene editing, and this is something that is contrary to the law in Ukraine. I don't know about their effectiveness, but they're analyzing this. Have you analyzed your genes and your genome, and have you analyzed the genomes of your relatives? Is there any interrelation? I mean, you knew what were your relatives and how long they lived or things like that. Look, by analyzing your own genome, you'll be able to answer 50% of the questions about the genome of your ancestors and your children. It's not about me, it's about the technologies and about what they give us. So there is no other way for the development of medicine but for genome therapy. And the pharmaceuticals know about this. They're currently focused their attention on it. Just last year, they've on clinical trial, they've registered a new therapy when a therapy is provided in the form of using different genomes. So they're doing the trial on 50 people, and there are other trial on the FTO gene and obesity gene, meaning that in some parts of the world, there will be a research testing certain medicine in a form of a human gene, and he'll be injected to adults, and that will have an impact on the body mass index, and you will have an advantage if compared to the other people that are consuming high calorie food. And that raises a lot of questions, actually, as people are truly searching for different options in order to, for the best for themselves. So you believe that the gene engineering and gene editing, would they allow to solve this or to search for a treatment for Alzheimer's disease, for different cancer diseases? Well, partially, because not a single medicine could be provided in the form of a one pill. So, I mean, the healthcare is not about the pill. It's about the doctor. It's about the pill. It's about the prescription. It's about pill number 1, 2, 3. It's a complex. It's a mixture. So genetics cannot do everything on their own. There are 2.5 solvent genetic illnesses that could be procured only through gene therapy. So you inject a gene and you're cured. There is breast cancer, some types of stomach cancer that could be sort of prevented through injecting certain genes, but genetics is used to cure some rare illnesses. But this is not the case for Alzheimer's disease and FTO gene. These are the FTE gene increases the risk by 6 times of having certain illnesses. So we are currently trying to select the best option in order to reduce the risk of having certain diseases. This is where it goes. Do we have something like that in Ukraine? Do we have those gene injections in Ukraine? Well, in Ukraine, it's a strange story. We don't have it, and we won't have it in the nearest time. It's not something that attracts too much of an interest, because there are a lot of other questions. But what about the general people? They tend to say that vaccines change the genome. Is that right or not? I mean, we're talking about this vaccination, and someone is already vaccinated, others not. Is that right or a myth? Well, I would really like to have this, but I would really like, to live by the way, by the time when by injecting something you would change the genome of a person, things like that, and like any solution that would cost like $10 and that would be able to change your genes. Believe me, we would not be developing all that we are developing, but this is not the case really. If I understood you correctly, increasing the life expectancy of a person by knowing this technology is something is impossible. Even by editing the genes, you won't be able to live until, I don't know, 1,000 years. That's an interesting trend. And someone analyzed that it will remove all the cardiovascular diseases in the country. Then we would increase our life expectancy by 4 years. If we'll, I don't know, solve or eliminate all the cancer diseases, we'll have plus 8 years to life expectancy. So it's cool, but it's easier to do otherwise. So it's a fairly speculative numbers, but this is something that we could do. So it's all about billions of lives. But speaking of longevity, many researchers in the world start to think about the thing that you're getting older, and this is something that could be treated. This is geroscience, gero research. This is one of the areas we are doing, like trying to understand the mechanisms of becoming elder. Can we somehow switch off these mechanisms? Because and this is going to have an impact on the rest of the diseases, because your age has an impact on many illnesses that you might receive. And therefore, you would like to have something that, well, you could use to solve this. We've already solved this issue for some cases, but not for the mammals, for example. And then you'll be able to come up with the pill against getting elder. And this is a specific mechanism. Getting elder is all about oxidizing. That's the Harman theory, but it was already proven wrong, and oxidizing is not about alding. So using antioxidizers would not be able to increase your life expectancy by a year or two. It was a good idea. It came up from the industry, so he thought that if he would consume different solutions, antioxidant solutions, then he would live longer, and it existed for a certain period of time, and we're not using that in the scientific literature. So it's basically a program that the person has. Partially, this is a program inscribed in genome. This is the all about this genome that makes person live longer or not. Besides, it's all about the development of medicine. We just 4 hours ago, I was in Copenhagen on a conference about longevity and eldering, and the same was discussed in there, where injecting the gene or genome of one person to another person, and this person starts to live longer. It could be done with simple objects, but not with the humans. Well, I agree with what was mentioned already in speaking about the longevity. The example longevity could be my conversations with the Minister of Health from Japan. There are isles in Japan where the average age of residents not 90 even, but 100. So it's all about the challenges that are available, or even larger challenges. Whenever you have an average age of the population is around 100, then servicing their life, providing different services to those people, that creates additional problems that we do not expect. That's why one of the directions for the development of robotics in Japan, that was related to supporting life and providing assistance to people, to elder people who live over 90 or 80. We have one more panelist, Maxim Kitko. Your company, IMASC. I'm sorry for mispronounced that in the beginning, but you're working for 20 years and you remain the innovative company in that area. Where is the best sort of market for your technology or for what you're selling? And we've heard about the trends. What is the association of those trends to your products? And what is Ukraine in relation to your products? Well, thank you for this opportunity to join you. We already have a very interesting discussion. Hopefully, it will be even more interesting later on. And indeed, we've been developing a range of products for functional diagnostics, and our major expertise in automated analysis of the different treatment procedures. So it's hard for us to identify where it's most popular. Speaking of the trends, I'd like to say that those technological changes that are currently happening to us, it's all about the connectivity. We can transfer a large scale of information from one point of planet to another. There are cloud technologies that allow to store all those data, and the artificial intelligence starting from 2011 that allow to process large volume of information and miniaturization and cheapening of the equipment, and that allows to bring a new class of electronic devices like wearables. Just 10 years ago, you could, I know, many would be surprised if you have a smartwatch. Now everyone has it. Now, all of that has an impact on the increase of medical information that has been gathered from any person, any patient, and this information will be analyzed, and there will be systems that are constantly monitoring the status of a patient, and later on it will have an impact on the development of the preventive medicine. The current objective of the medicine is to find an answer to the question how to treat. Later on in future, the major focus shall be shifted on how to prevent, how to avoid certain illnesses. And this is where all those technological changes are being developed. And by answering the questions to you, Alexander, well, do we have this perfect future? Speaking about the preventive medicine, I think this will be a distant future. And who knows, should we live up to that or not? Although hopefully we'll remain an optimist at that point. Speaking of the creation of multimodal monitoring systems over the health trend of a patient, I think this is something that is going to happen in a couple of years, and all the devices like Apple Watch that can gather the information on the cardio, that can gather cardio information. And then there will be platforms that will be other solutions based on artificial intelligence, and they will be able to respond to a critical situation, to any markers. And those data will help us to identify new prognostical markers that would help us to prevent any critical state from happening. And those sort of systems, they already exist, well, at least partially. So you should not sit and wait for a certain trigger tomorrow and everything would start working. So gradually, different companies, including Ukrainian companies, will produce some sort of solutions for the market. Currently, this is at different levels of readiness, but we have something on the market right now, and this trend will grow. And I'm sure that in a couple of years, uh, just like you have smart watches right now, in just a couple of years, you'll be producing some sort of medical information. This will be stored in the cloud. And based on this information, you would receive different recommendations. And this would increase the effectiveness of the healthcare. And this would increase the life expectancy, though the medical treatment would be cheaper. And this is a local task, really, but it's important to reduce the term of stay of the patient in the hospital. So if we'll be able to produce a high quality monitoring system, then we'll be able to reduce the inpatient treatment period, because later on we will be able to gather more information without admitting the patient to the hospital. Looking at the future, your technologies or similar technologies, they would be widely used in Ukraine, and not only in Ukraine, but in the world as well. So in Ukraine currently, well, we have a lot of problems about with cardiovascular diseases. If your technologies will be widespread, would be able to, well, we would be able to eliminate the problems with cardiovascular diseases. Around 400,000 Ukrainians are dying out of cardiovascular diseases, and 70,000 of them are dying even before they're admitted to the hospital. And I believe that the monitoring system would be able to, well, help a lot, at least with those 70,000 that are dying even before admitted to the hospital. Which countries offer the most demand for your technologies? The Western European countries, the Netherlands, the Germany, and so financial part has a role to play in terms of accessibility of such technologies. Well, of course, this is something that we need to take into account, as the Ukrainian pharmaceuticals market is a small one, rather small one, especially if we're talking about for different technological products, and I don't know how this could be implemented. Speaking of monitoring, what could be the price for monitoring the cardiovascular diseases? Well, this is a fairly cheap process. I mean, we're talking about the future right now, and this is the method that was offered by Jeffrey Norman Holter in 1961. So earlier that was something advanced like MRI research and something like that. Now in Kiev, the average cost of touch monitoring would be around 1,000 to 2,000 hryvnia. So that's one day or a couple of days monitoring. And we're talking about offline monitoring when they're using the special device that registers the heart activity. And there are different solutions that can offer the same data remotely. And this is something that could be done in the nearest time in an absolutely remote manner, and you can get the results online. So this system will be registering the cardiac activity over a day period, and they will be analyzing the and processing the data. And in some cases, we had situations when our experts were registering the cardiac activity within a day, and they could see some critical changes, and they contacted the doctor in order to, well, identify any emergent needs that would be able to save the patient. So we are currently implementing a number of aspects that would significantly have an impact on that. Good. Any questions? Anything to add? Any comments? Unfortunately, they are not using the microphone. We do need a microphone to that. Could you tell us? So there are 70,000 of people who do not receive proper treatment because there is no chance of doing monitoring. So maybe we should say that those 70,000 are dying of cardiovascular diseases, not because they couldn't couldn't have this monitoring, but maybe because they couldn't have the proper medical assistance. Our problem is not about the technologies we don't have, but about the assistance we don't provide. Look, on the overall, it's a comprehensive problem. Look, this is the first thing. The second question is, there are a number of technological solutions, including halters and remote solutions. There are company Mavi, there is Genestatic, and these companies are showing doctors how to do this. And do you know what's the answer of our doctors? Let's do that tomorrow. Let's do that the day after tomorrow. We don't have the time for doing that. So there is no sort of desire of Ukrainian doctors to do that. No, and that they don't want to waste the time for that. Well, I don't agree with you. There are different doctors, and we have different enthusiasts, and they're ready to employ this technology. So we have advantage over those companies that you've mentioned, and it's very good that it's within the trend of our discussion. We have Emitech, we have other companies, we have a competition, and this is the engine of a progress. But we've already have some advanced technologies. We worked with halters for many years, but this is a routine research method, but we are implementing the AI systems, the real-time monitoring. This is more advanced system, so we have large experience of talking to doctors, and they are different. Just wanted to add that this is that depends on the doctors and the hospital's protocols and standards, and who pays for that. If we take Western country with insurances and adiceuticals and medtech, this initiative comes from the insurance company. So the insurance company may insist on additional sort of diagnostics, because this would allow to save money for the future. So the doctor can be promoted through the source of treatment, source of available in Ukraine. It all depends on the desire. So who needs it? Who's willing to use that? Can we do genetic researches in Ukraine? If there are people who are interested in that, this could be done. And these researches could be organized. There are companies and people who are interested in using advanced technologies. We're not, well, the distance between different countries and the points of research are minimal. And today and most of what I was talking, most of the aspects that were raised by my colleagues, we can try and do that. We can get access to that. And in one of the large pharmaceutical conferences in San Francisco, JP Morgan, I was really surprised to see NVIDIA. Why are they on healthcare conference? But it appears that they are one of the drivers, because most of the chips and processor boards that are used for decoding of the genome, this is produced by the NVIDIA. Most of the equipment, well, NVIDIA is also being used by some of the equipment produced by Philips. So can we talk about the remote, or not remote, but small equipment for registering different diagnostic, for doing different diagnostics. So any person who has software, who has the device that could be attached to your computer, they can do different, for example, ultrasonography. Can we do the DNA analysis? Can we do the comprehensive or complex analysis in terms of researching the genome of the mouth? And that costs $4,000. This is the device produced by the British company. It's attached to the notebook, and this is something that any person can do in the field, for example, in the mountains, somewhere else that. So all you would need is to get a stroke. So there is a solution. You do some manipulations, and finally you will get the result. You will get the distribution of, you'll get the full analysis of the DNA and different microorganisms inside your mouth. And this is not a theory. It's something that is available. So anyone with $5,000, well, anyone with $4,000, right? So anyone can do that, can well, buy this equipment from UK. So the technologies are accessible to everyone who have financial resources, who would like to participate in these researches, who would like to build the future today. Do you have some sort of equipment like that? Metro tells us about the company which is producing analyzers, and certainly these are the equipment that is no longer on the market. Maybe later on in a year, they will provide additional changes to that equipment. They'll be able to bring that on the market. You asked whether we have something like that in Ukraine. Not like that. That they're making mistakes, and they prevent us from identifying certain coronavirus. But that's normal if you're living in Africa, for example. If you need to understand whether this is Ebola or not, you can use this technology. After 5 years, I believe that we'll be able to to develop the equipment in a way that would allow us to identify tuberculosis, for example, but not in September, definitely.
I have two questions. First, thank you for the conference and what you talked to us. This big data, if there is real-time collection of the all sensitive and health data, how this will boost the science development of this big data? And the second question seems more to you. What about security issues? Because if you collect all these amount of data and the cloud technologies, cloud services, they're not really that well protected. Do you pay attention while you're developing your products and your services on security? What are the trends on security part of all this health tech development? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the question. If it is directed to me, I can just give you example. For example, for us from the Philips perspective, we are working with some of the neighboring countries, not to name. They have a huge data lakes, and actually they're in possession of the governments. And these data lakes are basically not connected. They're just silo data lakes containing also some genomics data. So, and there is a dialogue right now to create the platform that provides security for them to operate and to work with these data lakes for the meaningful way. To get the conclusions out of it as well, to boost the science, because it sits with some universities as well. But at the same time, the mainframe, the computing power actually to processing these data lakes is not available. So that's one of the critical issues. And the second topic, for example, where we as a technology companies can provide the mainframe. At the same time, there is a question of the security, absolutely right. On one side, you would like to keep the protections because the data belongs to the state, to the owner, if maybe state institutions or the private. But on the other side, you would like to benefit as well for the patients, for the population, and still trying to keep anonymize the data as much as possible. There is ongoing right now the program in the EU side with the GAIA-X, and also comparing, on the Digital Europe part, how to integrate the data, but not to lose and not to compromise on the security of the data. So there's a lot of initiatives. I can provide you the separate data on this if needed, but there's a very strong adherence to the patient security and the data security in this case. And this is one of the things that is not speeding up the whole process. It's bit more, it's a very regulated and it gives the slower pace in this case.
Thank you.
The regulation in this area is going up. In majority of developed markets, it's going up. And recent developments, even between states within the United States, there is a regulations which have been recently adopted actually during this summer, which will restrict the pace of innovation. And this is a big question, which is being raised by a lot of high-tech companies because they have to adhere to a lot of complex standards and much more rigid regulation on the patient's data protection. Actually, one of the trend is that every person need to give a consent. The consent could not be default. So this is a big trend, but this is different in the emerging markets, in particular in Ukraine. Everything in Ukraine, actually, there is very limited restriction what can happen with the healthcare data today, which creates plenty of opportunity to experiment, but also creates plenty of opportunities for threat for individuals on the data that are stored here.
Тоді питання ще на 500,000.
Then I have another question. When do we end up with the pandemics? With all the technologies we have, when we would be able to overcome this pandemics? Finally, we need to read what would be the finalization of the outcome of the pandemics officially. But I believe everything goes according to the plan. Okay, according to the plan, we have a lot of lockdowns. So when do we finally be able to get rid of those pandemics? Is there any understanding in the science when we would be able to overcome this situation with the COVID? When we would be able to have it controlled? Well, there could be different scenarios from never until by the end of the year, or we'll have it every year. There is an article that considers different scenarios. It all depends on the masking regime or vaccines. So either it would be a part of the fluid, something like that. So every fifth of the people they're having flu once a year. So COVID will be one of them. That's at least one of the scenarios. We're looking at the mutations of the coronavirus in Ukraine, and if you take a look at all sequences globally, like 80% of all the mutations within the coronavirus, they already took place. So we already have around 20% that it could be a combination of different mutations offering different characteristics rather than one mutation that would produce any dramatic outcome like Delta mutation. If we'll be vaccinated, if will not be buying certificates, then we will be able to have at least 80% of cases covered. Well, it's all about the way the illness will be progressing. We have also the cases when different certificates about the vaccination were procured by the people instead of doing vaccines in reality. So it's all about the percentage of complex diseases that would result in inpatient treatment. I'm looking at the statistics, and not at the one, not in the number of people who have COVID, but the number of people who receive outpatient treatment. There is an increase, for example, in the number of patients in the United States, but not with regards to the number of patients that would produce an overload on the healthcare system. So we see that there is no such trend, and that's why we're not having conversations about lockdowns. It all depends on the state. It all depends on the sort of approaches of these and those states. They have different regulations. In Europe, there is a wide variety of approaches and policies around this issue. In the world, we can see, I'd say, a wide variety of political decisions. Speaking of the medical aspects, my colleague have already commented on that. Speaking of the medical institutions, it all depends on the policy, on the politicians, and the way and the approach they would take with regards to that aspect. Any other questions? Thank you. There were many examples with regards to the trends in IT technologies, using mobile apps for diagnostics. Hopefully, Ukraine will have something like that for the patients and for the doctors. Not always the patient is ready for that, not always the doctor is willing that, but there has to be any combination that has to work together. There was a trend with regards to the use of telemedicine. Is that necessary for Ukraine? Maybe some bright examples of telemedicine, and whether Ukraine has any competences or examples of using telemedicine. Do we need it for Ukraine? There are many examples from Europe, Asia, and other countries. Do we need to develop, and when do we have holograms? Well, the best example is the startup in the United States and in cooperation with Amazon. This startup has digitalized the list of questions that the doctors would ask a patient during the first visit. There is a device called Alexa, and you can talk to this device using voice commands, and depending on the protocol, while talking to an electronic device and with a large database, it's artificial intelligence, you'll get the diagnosis, and the system would offer you the doctor in the hospital that would be better, that would be best for you. And the accuracy of the automatic diagnostics is 98%. And the Tempus company, which is currently using a large scope of data, processing the images and providing the genetic analysis and modeling the probability or simulating the probability of offering a variety of treatment to a person. Currently, they have 2 million of patients in their program, we're talking about patients having cancer, different types of cancer, and they're using some elements of prognostication. This was something that was impossible just a couple of years ago, but now this is a reality, and the company is developing and it's increasing the pool of their patients. They are currently trying to have more solutions for cardiovascular diseases. This is a new trend. This is new patients who underwent certain different types of treatments. Can any Ukrainian be participating in any program of the startups in the world? Well, right. There are many startups that offer you to experiment. You can pay a fee and participate in the medical experiments. Do we have any Ukrainian startups? We do. Speaking about the telemedicine in Ukraine, there are startups in Ukraine that are investing in telemedicine. And during the coronavirus pandemics, there was an increase in the scope of telemedicine, and there was an increase in applications for telemedicine by 35 or 40%. There was a large sort of increase in the number of applications, and then there was a decrease. But I'd say this is a real tool, and it will stay. There are similar solutions in NYC in New York, and they're using like diagnostics booth. They are building different diagnostical centers in different districts of the city, and that produces additional diagnostics. That's additional level. That's another level. I don't think we'll have something like that, but initial diagnostics and conversations with the computer, this is something that is absolutely real. We won't have enough doctors who will be able to provide services. And should we have an increase in the number of applications by the patients, we won't have additional. We won't have sufficient doctors. Well, it's all about the law on telemedicine. And currently, the provisions of the law are limiting number of possibilities that we might have with regards to the analysis of X-ray images and laboratory results and things like that. So we don't have too much of an experts in Ukraine, but everyone knows we do have the problem with this law. So that is why it's the gray area in Ukraine. So at first we need to cope with this law, and then with the rest of the aspects. There are many challenges with regards to this law. I'm not an expert in that, but whenever we start developing this telemedicine and many other areas, everyone says that it's a gray zone. We can't start anything. We can't do anything with the telemedicine. There are many aspects with regards to consultations or seeing doctor aspect. Well, the Ministry of Health had to do the interpretations on the law that was passed, and the Ministry of Health has not provided these sort of interpretations. And currently, those experts in telemedicine, they're having discussions, debates about about what is the telemedicine. There are many experts in telemedicine. There are many businesses, and they're keep debating about the notion of that, what this is. Unfortunately, not using a microphone. Well, according to the law that we have, the telemedicine works as follows. They've done a number of centers. It works from doctor to doctor. What does it mean? Now, what was the idea of our lawmakers? There is a doctor who knows something, and there is a doctor or an average medical worker who might have an access to certain patient. So he would have the characteristics of this or that patient. Then he would submit all those characteristics to the central database. The database is processing that and provides feedback. So this is the telemedicine that we have. That's an old rural version of the telemedicine, so to say. Good afternoon. Hello. Thank you very much for this discussion. Speaking of the telemedicine, just wanted to say that from the legal standpoint, whenever we have a lot of startups when doctors are providing advices to patients online, but this is not considered as recommendations. It's considered like online recommendation. You can receive a recommendation from a granny somewhere by the house, so it's not considered an official recommendation from a doctor. So that what we have had out of COVID, we've had a lot of startups and these so-called online recommendations of doctors which are not legally regulated, and considering the fact that the level of experts that are allowing themselves to do online consultations. Whenever I have traumatologist consulting on COVID and he's looking at the analysis, and well, child doctors are trying to do recommendations for patients that don't, well, outside of their area of expertise. This is something that depends on us, on how we inform on this aspect. I mean, this is something that has to be done at the level of state. The state has to regulate this. We as the business have to promote this. The second question is about the medical information systems. Whenever we're talking about the data that we can analyze and we can implement any innovative programs and systems by Philips, by Halter, it's when we have data about the patient from the birth and until a certain period of time, and we don't have a unified informational medical system that would be able to accumulate all the medical data about the person. Large market operators would have their own data, and different operators, they have different data. So the question is, how do we see these large business operators, private business operators, they have medical information. This is sort of a monopoly. Could that monopoly present any risk, and what sort of market influence do they have? I will try to answer the first question. This responsibility, or what is the responsibility of a doctor in a private clinic under the law? Well, the doctor takes no responsibility in case of a private doctor. There could be different situations. I mean, we participate in criminal investigations. According to the Ukrainian legislation, the doctor which is providing recommendations to a patient in private clinics, he's not taking any responsibility for that. So that's the difference in telemedicine. So the private clinics can provide similar recommendations. So try to sue the private clinics, and they can do nothing. I mean, they cannot go to court against the private clinics. There has to be responsibility in relation to a doctor, and that doctor could be working anywhere, but the responsibility has to stay with him. And this is something not regulated under the legislation. So let's regulate the responsibility of the doctor on the overall, and then we could talk whether the remote consultation using telecommunicational systems, whether this is going to be a fact of providing services or not. I'm trying to just recall some of the provisions from the legislation. There was a law on rural medical supplies, and we've learned the telemedicine. The definition for telemedicine in Ukrainian legislation it does not require any additional regulations, but there is a subordinate legislation that covers how this service could be offered, and this is something that needs a proper interpretation. There were certain ideas. Let's change the statement or the definition for telemedicine in the law. Look, we don't need it. There is a statement, there is a definition for telemedicine. It means providing services through telemedical systems. And then At the initiative of the Institute of Telemedicine, we have a state institute for telemedicine, by the way. There were a number of subordinate legislation drafted, and they identified that this is the service that's provided in between of the doctor and the doctor. That was the like overall idea. And can the Ministry of Health initiate this issue? Yeah, easily. This is the subordinate legislation. They have an institute of telemedicine, so why not dealing with that? Going back to the question of big data, none of the countries in the world has central database with all the information on a single patient. There is not a case like that. In the United States, UK, they don't have it. Well, in UK, as part of the NHS, they have something like that, but if you have certain data which are being kept in private files, they will not be registered in the big data. Even the health set that we have in Ukraine, all the information they have is the doctor, the patient, and the diagnosis. So the eHealthy, it contains no information on the treatment process. So if you want to get a list of pills prescribed by the doctor, you won't have it. So the question about the development of eHealthy, well, eHealthy will need to be developed, and then there will be an initiative on the part of maybe of many civil organizations that is all about the interoperability of data in medical informational systems on patients. And one of the areas when part of the data, large part of the data is being stored in a central component, and me as the patient, I might have an access to my own data. But unfortunately, this is not something that is regulated in Ukraine, and technologically, we don't have anything to support this. We have Ministry of Health, we have USAID, we have different donors, we have different organizations that are initiating the process. But Miroslav?
If you just allow me. Yeah. Park here, I'm not expert for the legislation of Ukraine for the telemedicine, but I would like to refer something that I might find interesting actually. We are just after the COVID time, and we can imagine there will be a lot of patients affected by the COVID, having the lung diseases, cardiovascular diseases, and they will be spread across the country. It's really a critical mission for any state, to find a way how to look for those people being across the country. Traveling from Lviv until Kiev, trying to get a cardiovascular treatment and so on, or just giving example. But actually what I wanted to reflect something else, like solutions you've been mentioning as well. Gathering the data from sleep. We all know that in the population there is a presence of obstructive sleep apnea. The people have the problem with sleeping, generating the cardiac disease, diabetes mellitus 2, obesity. Alexander was mentioning if you remove all the patients of cardiac diseases, we gain 4 years of extended lifetime, oncological 8 years. But if you just look for the population, sleeping disorders in the populations are causing to dramatic decrease of the quality of life and the problem and the weight of the healthcare system. So solutions like monitoring, additional oxygenations during the dim time in night can consequently have the benefits for the oncological diseases, diabetes, by the cardiac disease. So this is all available. It's existing. So that's by implementing these solutions might be improving the healthcare. Why I'm referring, there will be a lot of people with the sleep disorders, with breathing disorders after the COVID time. And I think this is also a moment now to think how it will healthcare look in 2 years from now, in 3 years from now. With COVID still may be existing, with patients, a lot of patients post-COVID time. But we have the solutions. There are tools already available. So we can start thinking and prognosing right now how to make the next step. Sorry to break the discussions on the telemedicine, but just these practical examples can help right now the healthcare system.
The question is, we may think about we may forecast how the medicine will look like in Netherlands and probably in US and in developed countries. Though probably it will be very hard to understand how the medicine will look like in Ukraine.
Allow me, I can benchmark and compare the countries that we are looking on 30 countries in the neighborhood. So it's pretty much Central Eastern Europe and Russia. and it's no big difference. It's nowhere easy to find the money, and it's nowhere easy to stratify the pathway. Where do you go? But the more you know how the people are partnering in other systems, the more you learn by visiting and learning from the others, I'm quite sure the solutions will be found. And then the financing instrument from the developing institutions, you know better than all of us, will find a way how to secure the provisions. But actually, just to stratify the way where to go, what is the main pain point of the healthcare system, and then the solutions will be found. That's at least my experience looking across. Maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe you're right. I hope that you're right. На цій позитивній ноті, друзі, я розумію, що будь ласка, тоді, бо дуже цікаво.
Доброго дня. В першу чергу хочу
подякувати. Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to express words of gratitude for all the participants of this discussion. It was very interesting. I have a question to Dmitro. You had a very good presentation on AI, and I wanted to ask you, in the nearest future, your company, Diagnostics company, is that planning to implement any aspects of AI? And if yes, would you plan to implement AI in the production or the development of new medicines? We are currently considering the use of AI in business-related aspects, that is the sales, or analyzing patient behavior and many other behaviors, because these data are already available and you can work with this data. And one of the trends is the patient compliance. The more information we'll get on patient compliance, the more we can talk about the effectiveness of using this or that medicine. Speaking of the AI elements, they are being analyzed in the frames of drug discovery. Unfortunately, we don't see any platforms in Ukraine that can help us. We look at the solutions that are available, for example, in the United States, when there is a simulation. And this is something that they're using the AI. There are currently negotiations in progress, because it's all about the target solutions, etc. So that's a longer process. And one of the areas of drug discovery is the use of existing small molecules for identifying new possible uses of the known molecules. This is the trend where AI is being used. You wanted to provide any comment, additional comment?
Telemedicine.
Unfortunately, he's not using the microphone. Is there any risks that some companies have more information, some companies not? And Dmitro gave a good answer that none of the countries of the world have centralized data. And so those companies with data, they are responsible for a portion of the work that they're doing. I mean, they're not selling those data, they're not doing any additional stuff. And the challenges of Ukraine from the consumer standpoint, meaning that you cannot see what was happening to you, what was done with you through the e-health system. That's the most important thing. Well, this is something that we can implement, but we'll see whether it will be implemented or not. Well, I don't like to be pessimistic, but I'm sure this could be done, because the MIS market, it appeared in 1990s, and now it's dynamically developing market. We're talking about medical information systems, and together with MIS, there are additional PIS. This is the tool that the person can use. And currently, we are talking about different interoperability. This is a matter of time, because when the regulator, and believe me, I have conversations with Ministry of Health, with the with e-health system. They wanted to have a mechanism which requires certain subordinate legislation to be approved, and this would allow to have an exchange of information. There will be certain protocols that allow to to ensure that, and there could be different solutions made by IT companies. So it's not an issue that it's going to be difficult or not. I mean, right, even today we're using a lot of technologies that we thought that would never exist. Okay, I I need to express words of gratitude to our panelists for this interesting information they've shared, for this interesting discussion. Thank you very much. And hopefully we all stay healthy and we'll overcome the pandemics and we'll have only joy and optimism in future. And we'll have more technologies. Thank you. And we'll see you